We used to run by instinct. Now, we run by numbers. There was a time when the only sound that you'd hear out on a run was your breath and your footsteps, and maybe just the nature around you. Now it's beeps, buzzers, and the occasional notification telling you that your body battery is at 46%. At what point did we stop trusting our bodies and start outsourcing our intuition to a wrist computer? Welcome back to That's Runnable. Today we're talking about wearables, watches, rings, wristbands, armbands, chest straps, little pod things maybe that go on your shoes, but mostly watches really, to be honest. We're going to be exploring the evolution of wearables, the history of it, the benefits, the risks of wearables, and how to find a healthy relationship with them. I know I started using a watch only a few years ago, actually. Maybe five or 6 years ago now. Before then, it was all intuition. And I have to say, I miss it. But there are some benefits. Anyway, we're going to go through it all today. I'm going to talk to you about my strong opinions on intuition and the modern era of running that we live in. If you're new here, thanks for coming. If you're not, thanks for coming back. Let's get stuck in. So I was on a call the other day with someone who's coming into That's Runnable to help with operational excellence and strategy and all things that are not worth talking about on the podcast, all very boring. But, well, I find it exciting. But we were talking a little bit about this idea of data obsession. And I had mentioned that I had done a podcast episode a while ago, and it was about running in the modern era. I'm just scrolling through now to see if I can find it. There we go. Pros and cons of running in the online age, episode 38. Similar themes were mentioned on that episode. So if you like this episode, if you get to the end of this episode and you decide, I liked that, then go check out episode 38 as well. Talk about similar things, similar themes. And if you have listened to that episode, if you're a true OG and you've been listening for a while and you're going through all the episodes and you have heard that one, you'll know some of my opinions about wearables and some of the risks of being data obsessed. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that today. I'm going to try and take a little bit more of a different angle, potentially. But we all know it. We all know that we all want some sort of wearable. We feel like we need the data. And we all know that it impacts our running in some way, positively and negatively. But you'd be a fool to say that wearing something on your wrist that collects all of this amazing data does nothing for your running or impacts your running. It doesn't impact your running at all. You'd be a fool to say it doesn't impact your running. It absolutely does in some way. And we're going to talk about all those different ways, the benefits, the risks. And we're going to finish up by trying to talk about how you can get these wearables and use them in the right way and benefit from them, but also ensure that you're tuning in with your intuition and how you feel. Before we get stuck into this episode, I just wanted to quickly thank Innovate for sponsoring it. Innovate have been making trail shoes for many years now, born in the Lake District. They know what it's like to run over wet, sloppy, slippy trails. There is nothing that annoys me more than trail shoes that are released as if they're really highly technical, and then they just don't do the basic thing that is focus on grip. That is not what Innovate shoes do. Innovate have built an amazing reputation over decades of having the best grip that you can find. If you want some trail shoes that actually work on soft terrain, if you want some trail shoes that work on trails that not just dry. I feel like so many trail shoes out there, they only work on like dry gravel, which is just not the reality of when someone is running trails, especially if you're a Brit. Check out Innovate. If you haven't tried Innovate shoes, they really care about foot health. They care about making shoes that are foot shaped, that if you have a wider foot, or if you just like a wider toe box. I don't even have a wider foot. I just like a bit of room at the toe box. If you want foot-shaped shoes, if you want shoes that are nimble, that are grippy, check out Innovate's array of options at innovate.com, INOV8.com. Use the code Runnable at checkout if you want 15% off your purchase. Innovate.com. Thanks again. First, I want to talk, though, about the sort of history of running without tech. I want to go back. I want to get a bit nostalgic with you. Some people listening to the pod will remember times where they ran without a watch. Some of the younger listeners will find that bonkers, unfathomable. And some of the slightly older listeners, although not old, because this is all very recent, and I myself am included in the group of runners who used to run without data. But some of us will be baffled that there are people who have never run without some sort of data on their watch. Many people think it's necessary in order to perform well. But runners used to rely on body awareness. They used to rely on rhythm, on self-understanding. In the sort of 70s and 80s, runners like Steve Prefontaine, very famous runner, Frank Shorter, loads of runners would track mileage on paper or by memory. They'd sort of have a log. They'd just write it down. You might be listening and you may do this. Comment if you're listening on Spotify, comment below if you are someone who just logs your mileage on pen and paper, old school. But back then, people like Prefontaine, they'd run on feel. A conversational pace was actually literally a conversational pace. Heart rate training was sort of first introduced back in the 80s, really. But back then, it was seen as very experimental. You'd be, it would be difficult to find the tech to actually allow you to use heart rate data for your training. So it was a pretty experimental idea, to be honest, but it was around. But most people were just training by feel. And it's not like we didn't have some serious athletes back in the 80s. Ironman was just sort of becoming a thing. Long distance triathlon was really starting to see a boom, especially in the States. And you had Timex. Actually, I think the first mass market sports watch with like a lap function, a lap or split function, was the Timex Ironman watch. And that was in 1986. Perhaps if we are smart enough, we can put like a picture of these watches on the screen if you're watching. This was a game changer. Big move. A game changer for data-minded runners. Some people, especially the triathletes, wanted to take stuff a little bit more seriously. Having something on your watch that would actually time and have laps, so you'd be able to press a button and it would lap far beyond just a regular kind of watch on your wrist, a bit more of a stopwatch on your wrist. And then you had even further advancements, about 20 years later, 2006, you had Nike Plus with the iPod. First mainstream integration of kind of running and tech. This was a massive move. And to be honest, was probably seen to be like the first kind of major mainstream step towards like connected fitness. Before 2006, before we had these devices in our hands and we had this technology, it really wasn't a normal thing to be tracking your running in the way that Nike Plus kind of allowed you to do so. And then, around about that sort of time, you did have some GPS watches coming out. You had the Garmin Forerunner 201 just a few years before that, I think. My research says it was 2003 that first came out. This was one of the very first GPS watches. And I mean, when we're talking about the first GPS watches, we're talking about really, really early stage tech. Obviously GPS is not a new thing in 2003, but to just have a sort of mass market consumer product like the Garmin Forerunner 201, which if you go and look at pictures of it, it's clunky, it's chunky and clunky. It's arguably the data was pretty inaccurate, but it was a revolutionary kind of piece of tech. At the end of the day, to have something on your wrist designed for tracking your fitness was, as I said, revolutionary. And then we just saw the kind of modern boom with GPS and heart rate monitors and generally just algorithmic data and AI-driven insights. Now we have data in every metric imaginable, from cadence to sleep stage to stride length to power output. So much data is supposedly gathered on these devices. Much of it we don't know what to do with, and a lot of it is essentially collected relatively accurately, but then present the sort of the competition between these companies and how they are competing together is all about how it's presenting that data, how it's collecting it, what algorithms they have to collate it, what insights they can provide the user, how they're presenting it. It's all in that sort of user experience. And we have so much data now. The difference between what we were seeing 25 years ago compared to now is unimaginable. And it seems like it's happened overnight. But it's not exactly true. I mean, technology didn't appear all at once. It did creep in. And really what we saw over the last sort of 25 years is a stopwatch became a GPS, became a smartwatch, and as we'll speak about, all of that became an identity. Which brings us on to the second point. We've looked at a little bit about the history. We've got a bit nostalgic and gone back and remembered that we didn't always have these watches. And now I want to talk a little bit about the modern expectation. I spent a few minutes just talking about the fact that you're not just wearing a watch, you're wearing a social signal. I'm going to be honest, I bought this watch. I've got the Coros Vertix 2S on. I'm not saying it's the best watch in the world. I think there are better Garmins out there, to be honest. I think there are some things I have issues with this watch. But the battery is incredible. But I also got it because it looks like a rugged mountaineering adventure watch. And that's how it was advertised to me. It was advertised as an adventure watch with serious battery. It lasts longer than I do. And it's a social signal as much as anything else. I'm not one to buy an Omega or a Rolex if I could afford it. I would buy, let's say I was spending as much as this costs, 600 quid on a watch. Am I going to get a £600 analog, fairly okay watch? Or am I going to get a sports watch? I'm obviously going to get this sports watch. It is a social signal. And social media has, in my opinion, really started to turn running and your runs into performances. We all know the phrase, if it's not on Strava, it didn't happen. That's not even a joke anymore. It's like a cultural norm. People curate their runs like they curate Instagram posts. We're in the data sharing economy. We don't just record our runs, we publish them. And this adds obvious pressure. The watch that you're wearing to track and provide you with the data that you think is essential becomes a scorecard. It becomes more of a scorecard, this data that you're collecting, because it's so public. It becomes more of a scorecard than a tool. In my opinion, and a lot of this will be opinions. I'm trying to lean in more on opinions, because why not? Because you can come back and say I'm wrong about all this, but in my humble opinion, we've normalized external validation for something that used to be deeply personal. This is both my opinion and my experience. I started running when I was about 17. I think, in off season during the holidays, I would maybe go on the odd run when I didn't really know how to train, just in preparation for rugby season, because I knew it was coming up after the summer holidays. So I'd go out on a few runs and maybe think about the fact that I had pre-season coming up and I was going to be pretty unfit. The reality was I did nothing for my fitness. But that was when I started going out on runs. But really I started getting into running properly after I left school. I was 17, 18. And I enjoyed it in a different way than I do now. I still have the same relationship with it in many ways, but I'd go out there and all I would do is track the time I was out there for. To be completely honest with you, I think when I first started going out, I didn't even have a stopwatch or anything. I didn't even have a Casio. But at some point, I did have a Casio watch, and a classic Casio. There was a period of time where having a classic Casio was actually kind of cool, and I had one. And I think it is still quite cool. It's kind of retro and iconic, isn't it? But I had one, so I could time things, and I would time my run, and that was it. I'd just time how long I was running for. It was literally it. I didn't know how far I was going. I didn't care for how far I was going. I didn't even care how fast I was going until I found Map My Run on the internet. So I'd go on mapmyrun.com, and I probably found that because I Googled how do I map my run out or something, and it just came up. This is before it was acquired by Under Armour, and it was just a very simple website. I'd go on Map My Run and I'd use it for its original intent, which was to map out a route that I'd just done. So I'd go on the map and I'd be like, I went that way, I turned left there, I turned right there, went down here, blah, blah, blah. And then I'd finish the map and that's how far I ran. Oh, look, it was 6 miles. And then I would go and check the time that I'd run. I was like, oh, I did that in 40 something minutes or whatever. And then it would split and give me the average pace. I wouldn't have to do the maths. It would just give me the average pace. And I was like, oh, that's how fast I was running per mile. Cool. And that was it. That was the data I got. But whilst I was running, I was just in the moment. I was running by feel. I was present. I had a desire to measure things after. But during, it was all about feel. Running used to be about being present. Now it's about being measured. Now I want to talk a little bit about the benefits of wearables. I think I may sound today like someone who hates them. And I don't want to sound just like someone who hates them. I love them. I love wearables. I think they're a great thing. I want to balance the critique here. I don't want to sound too miserable and like I'm someone who doesn't think there's value in them. But I do think there are risks in them. I do think running has changed massively since the invention and invasion of wearables into the running space. But I do want to I want to be fair and practical, and I want to talk about the benefits of wearables. Just a quick note about Innovate, the sponsor of this episode. For many, it will be getting quite wet and rainy. This is the season where you got to check the weather before you go out on your run. And if you want to stay warm and you want to stay dry, then you will want some sort of running jacket that is waterproof. Innovate really do know what they're doing here, and they have a great array of waterproofs that you can run in, hike in, trek in, and to be honest, just live your life in them. Go check them out at innovate.com. Check out the jackets that they have on offer. They really know their stuff when it comes to proper waterproofing. I've had so many running jackets in the past that just haven't actually worked, but Innovate does the job. A friend of mine has had his Innovate jacket for 10 years, in fact. And so he thinks it's amazing. I think it's amazing. And so will you. Go to innovate.com, inov8.com, and use the code RUNNABLE at checkout, RUNNABLE, for 15% off. You won't regret it. Okay, back to the show. Of course, the structure and feedback is really important and really helpful. It's great for new runners, or if you're training for a specific event, it can help prevent overtraining. It can help prevent undertraining. It's a really good tool to just offer you feedback and be a technical assistant. To be like an assistant just on your wrist to say, hey, you're either doing this right or you're doing this wrong. And it gives you a cue of some kind to help you think about your training. It's measuring your data so you don't have to. It's relatively accurate these days. And it's taking that data and it's telling you what you should or shouldn't do based on what it knows. And so that is a good thing. I also want to say that it's a great thing for safety. I think this is quite an obvious one. GPS tracking and live sharing can literally save lives in remote trails and has saved lives. If you're going out on the trails and you don't have any sort of GPS tracking, I want to highly advise you to get some GPS tracking. It really obviously depends where you are. If you're not in a massively dangerous area that isn't often subject to crazy weather changes and that sort of thing, it's going to be less dangerous, but probably worth getting a GPS tracker anyway. Especially though, if you're in the mountains, if you live in a mountainous area, everyone who's in the mountains knows weather can change like that. A storm system can come over and you'll be caught in it and you're wearing very little, and it is dangerous. And so it is important to take safety precautions, take what you can obviously on your back with you, but also a GPS tracking device that's sending a signal is a really important thing. And so I want to praise GPS tracking devices for the safety that they can provide us. It's also great for awareness, for all of the data that it provides you. Heart rate, cadence, and zone metrics, teaching you about efficiency. It's actually giving you a more accurate idea of how you feel. You may feel a certain way, and then you can check your data and cross-reference how you feel with the objective data. That's going to help your awareness. So it's great for that. I've found personally that having heart rate data and balancing that with how I feel is a really nice way to become more accurate with understanding how I feel and honing that in. So it's good for structure, feedback, it's good for safety, it's good for awareness. They're also good for motivation. if you're tracking your runs in a very automated way, you're tracking your streaks. Some of these apps, the native apps, they'll give you streaks and stuff and awards, which is nice. Gives you a little bit of dopamine, some streaks, some badges, and all these metrics, they give you a sense of progress. They give you a sense that you're achieving something if you're seeing your weekly volume on a graph nicely presented. It's nice. It's nice to have this stuff. We like it, it's motivating. I think sometimes if you are not motivated and then you see that, you just need to go on like 1 or 2 more runs to get to the mileage that you are aiming for that week, it can be a great motivator. And I'm all for that. From a coaching perspective, the data itself isn't bad. All the data that you're getting is great and really helpful. And these companies like Garmin or Coros or Polar or Whoop or whatever else you're using, they're all investing a huge amount of money in improving how they algorithmically collect, collate and understand this data so that it can provide you with the insights that have high impact and value in your training. They're investing a huge amount in that. And a lot of this stuff is now, a lot of these data is being put into AI systems that is far beyond what we imagined we could have 20 years ago. This is all such a gift for our training and for our health overall. But it's not about just the data itself. It's about the relationship you build with it. So if it empowers you, brilliant. But if it controls you, it's a problem. It's not about the data itself. The data itself isn't bad. It's about the relationship you build with it. If it empowers you, great. But if it controls you, it may be a problem. A watch is sort of like caffeine. A little bit enhances your focus. The right amount, great. But too much? We've all had the caffeine jitters and felt anxious when we've had too many cups of caffeine. That's how I think of your watch. So we have had a bit of historical context. We've discussed a little bit about that modern expectation as a runner of wearing some sort of watch. We've talked about the benefits of wearables, and there are so many. Now I want to talk a little bit about the risks and the dark side. The main theme of this, as you might be able to guess, is the psychological dependency. So there are kind of 4 points that I have for you under the risks and the dark side of wearables. The first is the loss of intuition. The second is data anxiety. The third is self-worth linked to metrics. And the fourth is attention and presence. So, we'll try and go through all 4 very quickly. The loss of intuition. One of the risks of these wearables is that you stop feeling the run and you start managing it. You stop feeling the run and you start managing it. There's a very subtle but distinct difference between these two. I have very often been someone who has kind of slowed down mid-flow in a run. I feel good, and then I see my data on my watch and it says that I'm not in zone 2. My zone 2 would be beneath 150 BPM maybe. And it sort of would creep up and I'm at 156, but I feel good. I feel like I'm cruising. And to be honest with you, there's this interesting balance to strike there. Do I just slow down? Do I manage my run and be a bit stricter and go back into zone 2, slow down a bit? Or do I just lean in to how I'm feeling? Lean into what my body is telling me. I'm operating well. Maybe I turn this into a progression run. Maybe because I feel good, I move into this. My legs feel good. I feel like I can push just that little bit more. It doesn't even feel like a push. I can keep this an easy run, but I'm flowing. You stop feeling your run and you start just managing it. It's not what they would have done back in the day. Prefontaine wouldn't have looked at his watch, seen his heart rate was too high, and slowed down. No. He would have been feeling that run. Number 2, data anxiety. Look, this data is all fantastic. It's all great. But I am endlessly reminding people, because I think actually a lot of the problem with these wearables is that some of them are on a subscription model. Some of them are extortionate. You'd be paying sort of £30 a month, which, is a lot of people can pay £30 a month for something. A lot of people pay a lot more for a lot of things. But £30 a month or something to get this data, as if it's required, as if it's needed. And they forget that these watches, they can be inaccurate. The actual source of the data can be inaccurate. Heart rate sensors can struggle with wrist movement. Sleep data, often wrong. VO2 max scores, whatever they call this, VO2 max scores, they fluctuate daily. Yet people believe these numbers like gospel. And sometimes I think we believe these numbers because we want to believe, because we pay good money for it. I'm paying good money to get all this data. But little do they know that the actual source of the data it's simply not as accurate as they might think. There are so many examples of if your watch tells you that you've recovered poorly, for example, you might start the day having seen that data feeling tired before you even move. You wake up, the first thing you check is how was your sleep, and it tells you it was bad. The chances of you feeling worse after being told that you had a bad sleep are extremely high. Now, I'm not saying sleep data and knowing whether you had a bad or good sleep is a bad thing. Hear me here. I'm not saying that your Whoop is a bad thing. I think it can be great. Listen to what I said earlier. Just a reminder. If it empowers you, brilliant. But it can 100% influence how you feel. It can disrupt your intuition. And as we see in so many trials and studies, the power of placebo is impossible to exaggerate. And being told something by a watch or a wearable that you're paying good money for and you want to believe like gospel will impact how you feel. It will. Just know that. data anxiety is a very real thing. It's a very real thing. So be conscious of how much you rely on that data. Be conscious of how much it impacts how you feel. Because relying too much on it, seeing it as gospel, could be to your detriment. Okay, moving on. I could say a lot about data anxiety. It's actually quite a serious problem. But number 3, a third risk and dark side of these wearables is self-worth linked to metrics. You start judging your value and your self-worth on paces, on readiness scores, recovery stats, on a number. The run becomes a test rather than an experience. Not every run has to be a test. Not every run has to be measured and compared and analysed. It just doesn't. Even the pros are not analysing every single part of their training. Because sometimes it's just not that deep. Sometimes you just, whatever, you're not performing at the best, need some more rest. It's not that crazy. But we can fall into a trap when we're given this data, when we have this data to hand, and we don't have professionals and coaches around us and experienced people to help us be measured about what we're measuring. We can start to assign self-worth to these metrics. And I want to warn you of that. It's sort of similar to social comparison. You know, if your mate has a fitness age of 28 and yours is 34, what does that even mean? What does it even mean? Is he really 6 years younger than you? I don't know. What does it mean, guys? Does it have anything to do with your self-worth? Do you really value that in any serious way? Should you really value that in any serious way? Questions. I'm just asking questions. Okay, number 4. I've called this attention and presence. We all know what it's like to be constantly glancing, checking splits, checking pacing, checking heart rates, breaking that meditative rhythm of running. I'm guilty of it. I'm always trying to look at my watch less. But I'm guilty of it. Sometimes it's good to have it there. But like I said, sometimes it can become an obsession. We run to escape the noise. But sometimes the noise just moves to our wrist. We run to escape the noise, and then it just lands on our wrist. You know, I've had times where I've ignored the pain that I'm feeling in wherever, my hip, or maybe I've got some sort of issue in my foot or something. I've ignored that pain. I've ignored the intuition because my watch said that I'm good to go. What the fuck does my watch know about how my foot feels? Huh? It doesn't know anything. Or I've had days when my watch said that I needed to recover, but I felt great. And then the run was perfect. Okay. There are real risks and there is a real dark side to these wearables, and I want you to be conscious of it. You can lose your intuition. You can really genuinely suffer from data anxiety. It can impact your actual experience and feelings and health. Your self-worth can be linked to the metrics, and you can lose presence, and your attention can be constantly drawn to the noise you're trying to escape, because there it is, sitting on your wrist. Okay, do you actually need one? Do you need a watch? Are you even a runner if you don't have a Garmin? Well, I don't have a Garmin, so maybe I'm not a runner. But do you need one? It depends, you know? It depends who you are and what you need from running. I'd say that one of the most difficult questions to answer that many people ask, second to what shoes should I buy, is what watch should I wear? What watch should I buy? There are so many now. We used to just have the Garmin Forerunner 201. Now we have many different brands. We've got the main ones, but there are big brands out there. There are some challenger brands coming out. We had Uno Watch on one of the Run Biz segments many episodes ago, which is a modular watch. There are challenger brands coming in, but you have the staple brands of Garmin, Coros, Polar. What's the other one? I'm going blank on the other one, man. Someone, you're shouting it. You're shouting it right now. I know it. That's going to annoy me. There's a few. But you know, like for beginners, a watch it's great. It can teach pacing. It can teach consistency. It can give you data that keeps you accountable. You know, a beginner is not going to know what data and how to track the data manually. They're not going to be dedicated enough to do that anyway. So just giving them the data real easy can be great. To be honest, I've seen many beginner runners get a watch and suddenly become more obsessed with running. Brilliant. Love it. I think it can be a great motivator. And so getting something simple, maybe a Coros Pace 3, I think the 3 is out now, or like an old Pace 2, that's a great watch. Or getting one of the Forerunners, also great watches. There are watches you can get for, really simple watches you can get for under 100 quid. There are plenty of entry-level watches out there. For more experienced runners, I mean, once you understand effort and recovery, data becomes less essential, but in a funny way becomes more essential if you're trying to really optimize. They're such a great tool for optimizing. If you're looking to really get accurate with your splits, they are sensational. And, you know, if you're looking to run a fast marathon time or half marathon time, and it's really clinical out on the roads, having that data accurately measured is unmatched, and you're just simply not going to be able to match the level of accuracy with which you can train if you're just going by intuition. So really, I would say experienced runners, if you can get a watch, you're going to want a watch. For ultra running, I mean, that's what I do. I would say that, you know, battery life, super important. The Coros has a sensational battery life. Some of the top end Garmin's do too. Navigation features can be really practical. There are some races out there that will require that you have the map, the GPX file on your watch. The Coros falls short on this, I believe, and I just think that it's actually pathetic, the navigation that the Coroses have. But the battery life is unbelievable. So there's that. But yeah, I mean, like every brand has a watch that, I mean, many of the watches just do the same thing. So if you're really sort of overthinking it, just get one that's not too much. I think, in my opinion, the best value for money for a watch that does many things is the Coros Apex. I've never had it, but it does pretty much everything this one does. It's just got slightly less battery, but it's pretty amazing watch, that one. Do you actually need one? You don't need one. It really depends on what you're training for, why you're training, how you're training. I think it's a myth that you need a watch. I think you can get very far with your running without tracking any of it. I mean, why would I sit here after some of the greatest runners who have ever existed never had watches and tell you that you need one? You don't need one. It's a nice to have, and it's incredibly nice. And if you really want to optimize and get further with your running, it's going to be a great tool for that. But, you know, there are tons of professional marathon runners who do not race with a watch. I would actually say like it's becoming more and more popular for like these road runners to not run with watches. I think it's funny because people who are really data obsessed are usually not the sort of highest, the sort of fastest, most professional, most elite runners. Actually, you'll find that these really elite runners, they get to a point where they really know, they're intuitive enough to really know the data that would be being presented on their watch. So they start using the watch less. And there are plenty of runners out there who will do sessions without a watch intentionally, who find the watch a distraction. And actually, I think for the sort of every runner, for people like us who aren't elite, I think we're more at risk of being data obsessed than those who are at the elite level, which is a funny thing. So when you're a real beginner, it can be really helpful to get a watch eventually. If you want to sort of start to optimize, start to improve, it's a massively helpful tool. But then once you're right in the sort of elite level, you're exceptionally experienced, you know, you'll probably find that you won't need it as much. And you will retroactively look at the data rather than looking during your running. And that's a big difference as well, is that like we can discuss looking at the data whilst you run. That's a very different thing from reviewing the data after. So I want to make that clear because I don't have any specific point laid out in the plan for this episode about that. But I think that is worth mentioning. That like a lot of what I'm talking about is looking at your watch whilst you're running, and that really impacting your kind of attention and presence during the run and your ability to be intuitive with how you feel and all that sort of stuff. But if you can then figure out a way to have the data and then review it after, I think that's a great thing. And I think the best way to do that would be to not have that data public and just have it for you and your coach. But, you know, there is this whole added aspect of it, which is that a lot of the data, as I said at the beginning of this episode, that we are collecting is being published. And that does impact, regardless of whether you're looking at the watch and actually seeing the data at the time, that does impact your experience of your run. Sometimes it can just be best to run without the numbers. No time, no distance, just feel. Many people are cottoning onto this. So maybe I should challenge you. Maybe just leave the watch at home one day this week. Go for a run. Don't know if you've ever heard of this idea of naked runs, but that is a run with no tech, just body awareness. Now, I'm sort of someone who would never do that because I do just want to track everything. But maybe I should go on a naked run. Do you know what? I might make a promise to do that. There you go. Okay, coming towards the end now. What data actually matters? What data actually matters? Well, keep it simple. Clarity cuts through the noise. Distance and time. So you want to track your volume. You don't want to be perfect about this, but tracking your volume, tracking how much time you're spending on your feet. Tracking your distance is a great thing, but of course your pace is dependent on effort levels and that sort of thing. So for me, I think like time on feet is a really great thing to track. Tracking your heart rate, really useful for when you're learning about like effort zones and recovery. But please don't obsess about this. Don't obsess over zone 2. Made a video recently about Zone 2 training, just because I've seen a lot of people give Zone 2 training grief unfairly. I think it's a great tool, and I think we've swayed the pendulum has swung towards everyone talking about Zone 2, which I find quite funny because it's just not a new thing, and those who think it is are sort of obsessing over it being not a thing. This camera's not tracking me. But don't obsess over your heart rate data. It's really not worth doing that. Really try and lean into how you feel. Sleep and HRV, heart rate variability, only really valuable if you're interpreting trends with this. So daily fluctuations are going to happen. Don't worry too much about daily fluctuations. A lot of the data actually that we see being tracked in some of these more revolutionary wearables, or even like Zoe, for example, is guilty of this, like tracking data and basically fear-mongering a little bit, whether they're doing it intentionally or not, about certain spikes, and as if they're unnatural. You will have certain spikes in stuff. Your body spikes sometimes in things. Sometimes it fluctuates. One day will look different from another. It's not a massive deal. It's not a massive problem. Please try and focus on trends. Try and interpret trends. If you have an app that's not telling you it's not giving you information about data over time, ignore the app. It shouldn't just be telling you that we have a piece of data here that you should be concerned about. It's really important to be tracking these trends. Ignore what you should ignore, and ignore VO2 max estimates, please. Just remember, your watch doesn't know you as well as you do. Your watch doesn't know you as well as you do. I'll say it 3 times. Your watch doesn't know you as well as you do. Your watch doesn't know you as well as you do. Okay, 4 times enough. VO2 max, it's just like probably an estimate. And unless you're plugging in data into your watch that's really accurate, unless you've been using it for many years and you've really, really tested your body at the upper limit, and you've really sort of given it that full polarization of training and it knows you very well, these VO2 max estimates are usually worth ignoring. Training readiness. Garmin is very guilty of this. Garmin, one thing I don't like about Garmin is just how much it tells you. When I had a Garmin, it was just constantly telling me I was being unproductive or whatever. And it's just, shut up. Stop telling me these things. You know best whether you're ready to train, whether you know best whether you're well recovered. Really tune into this. Please just try and use these sort of training readiness prompts as just that, and not as gospel. Stress scores can often be just rough guesses. A lot of this algorithmic data is not as accurate as you might think. I think always just take it with a pinch of salt. Stress scores can be wildly inaccurate. They tell you that you're not stressed when you actually in fact are. Tell you that you're wildly stressed when you're not. I really want you to tune in with how you feel. So keep it simple. General message here is the data that matters is the data that changes your behavior. If it doesn't make you move differently, it's just noise, in my opinion. The data that really matters is the stuff that will actually impact how you're training. And that has to be coupled and paired and married with your knowledge of yourself. Focus on consistency, focus on recovery, and focus on listening to your body. Consistency, recovery, listening to your body. If you're not sleeping well, eating well, and enjoying your training, you're not optimizing. It's as simple as that. But if you are sleeping well, eating well, and enjoying your training, in my opinion, that's the definition of optimization. Okay, finally, some recommendations. Well, I just want to kind of go through, I'll just go through 4 brands that like often people use, or 3 brands that feel like the main ones right now. and then like kind of other. I'm just got other written. So I want to just give my honest take. I'm not like a tech reviewer, but this is just my honest take on what I know about these watches. And I've had Garmin and Coros before, and I have many friends and athletes, clients with Apple Watches, and then there are a bunch of others as well. But Garmin, I think, is probably best for data depth. If you really want like a lot of data and depth in your data, Garmin's probably the best. They're very reliable. They are quite expensive, but they are reliable watches for the most part, although mine did die after 2 years, so that's anecdotal. They can have relatively long batteries. I mean, compared to very cheap alternatives, they do, but not compared to the Coros. The Coros watches have incredible battery life. If that's what you care about most, they win hands down on that front. They have a much simpler interface. The app experience is, in my opinion, superior, and just solid for kind of trail, ultra running. I think they fall short on the navigation compared to Garmin, but they're also cheaper. So there's also that. And then Apple Watches, not in the same category, in my opinion. So difficult to compare, but if you insist on comparing them, brilliant everyday integration. You know, an Apple Watch does far more than an actual sports watch. You can, of course, get the Apple Watch Ultra, maybe a bit of a fad model, but, you know, not built for ultras. Just not built for ultras. Battery life, very poor. You're not going to get your sleep data on an Apple Watch because you've got to charge it overnight. And then all these other brands that you might find out there, some are really good. You will get like all sorts of great data on them. You still get your great recovery analytics and heart rate data, and you know, Polar, for example, great for heart rate accuracy. I have a Polar chest strap, very good. But generally, you know, look for a watch that suits your needs. I know that's really unhelpful, but to help you, I look for watches that disappear. That's my... That's what I want. I want a watch that disappears. One that gives me information when I ask for it, not when it decides I need it. So I would move to a Garmin because I need better navigation, but I tell you what, I do not want to be told that I'm being unproductive or whatever else. You can shut up on that front. Don't want it. Coros doesn't do that. Less sassy. Generally, if your watch is smarter than you, it's probably too smart, I think. Okay, so we've got through a lot. We got through a lot today. I actually thought this was going to be like a half an hour episode, but we got through a lot. Of course, you know, I don't want to sound too negative about watches. I really want you to embrace the amazing technology that we have out there. I want to give a little plug to Una Watch. If you want a modular watch and you want to support a UK startup, you can go check them out, unawatch.com, I believe. They came on the podcast and spoke in a Run Biz segment. I think it's really a cool concept. You know, I think a lot of these watches, once they die, you throw them. If the screen smashes, that's it. You can't get it replaced. But Una Watch is modular, so you can get anything replaced. And modularity in tech is a great way to make it more sustainable. I want you to embrace this technology, but I want you to recognize its dangers. And I want you to be cognizant of how it is impacting your experience of your running. I want you to remember that for many years, runners were not using tech like this. It is not needed. You may feel like it's needed because there is this modern expectation, this social signal, and you want to be able to track easily and you want to be able to post. And your running has gone from something personal to something public. There are huge benefits to running, to wearables, to running with wearables. And I want you to be aware of those benefits. Structure and feedback, safety, awareness, motivation. But there are also huge risks, and there's a dark side to it. Loss of intuition, data anxiety, self-worth linked to these metrics, attention and presence lost. Do you actually need one? Please question this. Please question this. If you already have one, then great. If you don't already have one, question whether you need it. It really depends what you're using it for. And then we went through what data actually matters, what you need. General message here is to keep it simple. The data that matters is the data that changes your behavior. If it doesn't make you move differently, it's just noise. And then a few of my sort of recommendations or a little bit of a rundown on Garmin, Coros, Apple, the differences. If your watch is smarter than you, it's probably too smart. Okay, so just to close. At the end of the day, your body is the most advanced wearable ever made. It's been tracking your effort, your stress, your recovery since birth. Tune in with this. Part of being a successful runner is tuning in with your intuition, tuning in with your body. I want to encourage curiosity. Upon approaching this data, use the tech to enhance connection, not replace it. So, one final takeaway challenge for you. How about you do one run this week? No matter how experienced you are, you do a run this week where you leave the watch at home. You go out with your tan line only. Notice what happens to your breathing, to your pace, your thoughts. You might just find that you run more freely. Maybe it's more free than you've run in years. Because when you stop tracking your run, you finally start experiencing it. Thanks so much for listening to this 62nd episode of the podcast. I really, really appreciate it. This is That's Runnable. I've been Tommy. And if you care to rate, subscribe, share the podcast, if this has come up in conversation with a mate and you think they'd enjoy this to accompany their run, share it with them. Please do engage, comment below if the platform you're listening to this on allows for commenting. Engage with the conversation. If I've said anything that has annoyed you or you just thought was ignorant and you disagreed with, let me know. I'd love to hear and start the conversation. There's a link in the description where you can send in your questions, you can send in a voice note, and we can have it on a future episode. Check out the sponsor of this episode. Thank you to Innovate for sponsoring. That is it. Go out, experience your runs, run the runnable, keep showing up for yourself, and I'll see you next time.